All right, welcome everybody. This is the Kubernetes SIG architecture meeting for community meeting for November 7th, 2019. Well, let's just get going. Tim's, I think the last meeting AI status, I don't, looks like I didn't summarize here what those are, but as I recall, the one we didn't get a readout on, let's see. Jordan had one here, but I don't think he's here to comment. I don't know if we have
I see Jordan.
Oh, did he join?
Yeah.
Ah, yes, he did.
I'm here. I am catching up on my to-dos after the Go 113 thing landed. So this is still on my list.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. All right. Were there any other AIs from last week? I think I left. I think last meeting, I think I had to leave early, so I don't know where it landed. I don't see anything else here. Okay, so then we would do sub-project readouts. This is a short agenda today, so hopefully we'll get out of here a little early. But Dims, I think you said you could talk a little bit about code.org and where it stands.
Yeah. So the main thing that we were discussing in the last meeting was what to do about Hypercube. The plan of record that we had was, at least in the issue, as discussed in the issue, was, okay, we don't want Hypercube in KK, so, and some people want it, so let's move it out. But then the issue there was, if we move it out, we will vendor KK, and anybody who has to maintain that code will have to struggle with things that we are telling the community not to do, which is vendor KK. So then we said, and it's a simple Go file, and all it does is use everything from KK. So, and it will be prone to breakage, and it will, it's going to be hard for people. So then the thing we also said was, look, we have to move people off of the Hypercube container image. So how do we do that? And there were two other things that came up here. One was, do we even have a deprecation policy for stopping when shipping things? That was one of the side discussions that happened. So we said, okay, let's circle back. Let's come up with a better strategy. And then Jordan came up with the idea of, let's ship a container image, which is going to have all the binaries that, is potentially usable from Hypercube. Then we'll just have a script or a Go file that will turn around and call the actual binaries. So we ended up prototyping that, and that seemed to work really well. The caveat here is the size of the container image is going to be bigger than before. So, and what the carrot and the stick here is that we would like people to move off of the single Hypercube image. So we are giving them an image which is costlier to them in terms of size. So because of that, they will move off. And we will, over a period of time, will deprecate this image and stop shipping it. So that was the new plan that we came up with. And the PR actually merged this morning. And right now we have we are going to ship one image in 117, which is a Hypercube image, which looks and feels like the image we had before, except it's going to be slightly bigger. So that's the main thing that we talked about in the last meeting. Anybody remember anything else, Jordan?
Mike Denise has been working on cleaning out a few dependencies that we were only using for very minimal things, like CFSSL and a couple UID library, things like that. So we're trying to identify dependencies that are pulling in a lot of other things that we are only using for a very minimal number of features, and see if we can collapse onto standard library functions. So a couple of those went in this week.
So one of those would be for IPVS proxy. We pull in Docker lib network, which pulls in Boku other things, and it's literally for like one file. It's for one lib network. Relatively small library.
So is that work already done, or is it in progress, John?
Oh, that's been in there since pre 1.11, when GA in 1.11, the IPVS work. So that's been in there for well over a year.
Is there anything tracking that dependency that's nasty and minimally used?
No, just what was just put on that bullet right there. That's tracking it.
All right.
Okay, good.
So I want to be clear here. It's weird for us to say we have GA things, but we don't have the entire test suite apparatus for CI blocking signal for a release, because we get bugs that flow in from there that I think are just, they should never exist.
From IPVS you're talking about?
Yeah, if we're saying that this is GA'd, we should have blocking CI signal for a release for stuff like this, but we don't.
Tim, we are saying that there is some code which pulls in a bunch of libraries, and it's been there from 1.11.
Yeah, I think Tim was commenting on John's
topic.
statement that this was GA since 1.11.
Oh, okay.
There's an orthogonal comment.
Okay.
One I agree with, but not related to the point at hand.
Okay,
agreed on both points. Yes. No,
we want to get rid of it. So good. Yeah. Okay.
So, if you're aware of things like that,
we don't want to get rid of IPVS, right? But I'm just saying that you were saying I only bring it up because Jordan said, hey, what are things that have minimal dependencies? And I only discovered this because we wanted to update some dependency, right? And I tracked it down, and I'm like, this lib network is used in like this one narrow place, and that's it. And yet it's pulling in this whole list of dependencies, right?
Yeah.
So it was just accidental, essentially, that I found that, right?
Yeah,
so,
that's an excellent candidate for like a tech debt code organization issue. The people who pulled in the code for that might not even be aware of the gridlock it's causing. And so it's at least worth an issue to surface that and say, hey, is there a way we can like pull out this one function or do this differently because it's causing pain for the whole project?
Yeah, and I believe all it's doing is doing some, if I remember correctly, it's really just making some calls into the kernel to like, mess with netflow tables or something like. It's not a very, profound piece of code that's being used as far as I recall.
Definitely open an issue and tag in the relevant SIG and like the code organization stuff. Maybe put it on the tech debt board.
Okay.
Yeah, Andrew, action item for Andrew Sycam at this point.
Okay.
Yeah, I've seen some like lighter weight netlink handles for IPVS. That might be worth looking into. I can follow up.
Okay. So, and the other one, big chunk, was removing the in-tree OpenStack cloud provider. I have a PR ready. The PR was originally logged October last year, and I've been revising it periodically, and the latest revision is ready. I'll get an okay from the OpenStack folks, and then we will check with the CSI migration stuff, and then we'll figure out if we can merge that before next week as well.
Tim, there's also discussion around using feature forks instead of feature branches.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Can you speak about it, Andrew?
Sure. Yeah, we were talking about some of the pain points with feature branches because it requires giving folks working on the branch higher privilege access to the Kubernetes repo. And so Jordan recommended if folks can just create their own personal forks and then just grant access to the teams that are working on that And then it would effectively give people throwaway feature forks. The biggest downside to that is we lose history of the fork if the person maintaining the fork deletes it or takes away that access in the future, things like that. But it would be much easier to do that instead of granting privileges for branches.
To be clear, this was kind of an experiment. We've tried a few feature branches in the repo, in the Kubernetes repo, 2 or 3, I think. And this, the Ingress folks were wanting to try to get a feature branch started. And so this is kind of an experiment. It seemed like it was a good fit. They have maybe 2 or 3 people collaborating on it. And the end result is a series of commits in a regular PR to Kubernetes. So you don't lose commit history or anything like that. If this works well, we might look into having an org that is not really a privileged org. It's just one where we could archive repos to preserve history under the org. But you would do a normal create a branch, open a pull request to Kubernetes, and all the CI stuff would work normally there. So this is still kind of experimental, but it's pretty lightweight, and we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, it's better than, we tried something before, and that has its own set of issues. This will hopefully bring out one more set of issues. So hopefully the next iteration will be better, I guess. Okay, that's all we had. Andrew, anything else?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Yeah, back to you, John.
Okay, production readiness reviews. So we met yesterday for the 3rd time, I guess. And we're moving along. We are working on folks reviewing the questionnaire as it is today. We're working on coming up with some field research around previous, both a Google. The idea is to come up with both a Google form and also a sort of more in-depth interview for one-on-one interviews. And we'll send that out and broadly as we can to try and solicit, horror stories and other kinds of production issues people have had to make sure that we're making, asking the right questions. And at the same time, we've picked out a handful of CAPs that we're going through with the authors to answer the questions as we have them today and try and see how effective that is. So nothing super exciting to report. We're just moving along with kind of the pilot phase of this.
How many people are active, John, in your group?
So there's about 10 to 12 people that have signed up to be active in the program. I think yesterday on the call we had maybe 6 or 7. But folks are contributing and, it seems to be getting off the ground.
Glad to hear.
Yeah. And there's a session at the summit at that. I'm just going to talk about what it is, sort of what people can expect in the future, where the pilot phase, and then also try to solicit cooperation with the team that's doing the field research. There are no other questions on that. I guess we can get an update here on the TechNet.
Sure, I can speak to that. So myself, Alessandro and Dims have been working on this. We've probably met like 3 times now, and we're kind of trying to define what this means, what we want to do, and what are the what are the ways we can find a tech debt or something that feels like a tech debt. And then we have a project project ongoing that has an incoming where we can flag issues as possibly tech debt. Can someone click on that doc link or? Yeah, so basically, me and Alessandro and Dim have we're still collaborating on this doc. This is basically a rough draft of what we think we want to do and how we want to do it. So, essentially, we want to find out what a tech debt is and how we can identify it quickly, and then bring those tech debt to attention to this SIG, and possibly find a paved path to trickle some of these findings into the SIG release planning, right? So this is here. This is basically an attempt to define what a tech debt is. John, can you go to what the tech debt is? Yeah, the feature request or tech debt. So basically, we are saying that we can distinguish tech debt from feature request by causing the quality of the change, and that would be required, and then the recurring cost it will eliminate, right? I think that last part is the key part. I feel like if we can find issues, gaps, or PRs that basically help eliminate some kind of recurring cost, whether that recurring cost is in areas of maintainability, usability, debuggability, or adoption, right? And I think the key point is how do we identify those issues? So, John, can you scroll one more time? I mean, basically anything we're basically looking for these factors in things and finding out if there are a lot of emojis or thumbs ups, then that probably means that a lot of people want that. Again, like just wanting is not essential, is not clear that it makes it a tech debt.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess maybe you were about to enter into it. I was trying to figure out how adoption was related to tech debt. I can certainly see it related to features, but it's less obvious to me how adoption relates to tech debt.
Sure. So I think, lot of adoption also helps improves the credibility, as well as it brings more people to support it, and it vouches for what direction those things are heading, right? So I think in that sense it helps. But yeah, it's not clear. So I can make that more clear in the doc. Does that make sense?
The way I read it, the reference there was to the fact that technical debt reduces adoption, which seems pretty plausible to me.
Yes, yes. I think that's a very accurate description. Anything that improves the adoption is what we want to tackle as well. So that is in one sense technical debt. And then there are other things like I think one of the things I've seen in issues is like people felt so much pain that basically they actually worked around it by creating an operator like thing, not essentially an operator, but basically a workaround for it. I mean, I know that we have layering where basically we say this is where the Kubernetes boundaries end and something needs to be an operator. But I have an example of where somebody found out that they were not able to find whether a container was killed because of an OM event or not. So I have an example where somebody basically created something that observes for things in different areas of the container status and conditions, and finally flags an event that says, oh, this event was basically killed. This container was basically killed by an OM event. So that's basically an example of an area in debuggability where people felt the pain, and there was an issue where multiple people commented on it saying we should have that as an event or something that clearly shows why this container started, but the actual reason for that container restart was OM killed event that is like deep beneath in some logs or something.
So I guess is there general agreement with, I don't know, the people here that is something other than our project working sort of exactly as designed, where we have an API where this thing is clearly discoverable, but there are trade-offs to be made in terms of cardinality of metrics that as a project we don't want to embed, and so we made it possible for a third-party component to come in and do it?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, basically, there will always be cases like that where we'll have to figure out whether that's a deliberate attempt from the Kubernetes core group to say that that's something that we don't want to flag, and it should be built as an upper layer versus things that should belong in this. So we need to find a way to figure that out.
Right. And the effort here is also not that this group of 3 people is going to go fix this problem or anything like that. We are just looking for patterns where we're going to find issues, put them into buckets, take them to relevant SIGs. That's the process that we want to follow. We're going to shine light on things that are languishing and or not being worked on, or where people are asking for stuff. Right. The other example is, for example, the R limit one, or the namespace deletion was a hard problem for a while until we did a bunch of things about it. Right. So there are several examples from the past where we can say that, I wish we could have fixed it earlier, or people were getting stressed about why is my namespace not getting deleted, that kind of stuff, right?
Right. So we have identified some broad categories and made columns in the project board. So, I mean, I think the main thing we want to tackle is come up with some criteria that we all agree on that we can publish in this doc, so that people or community or users have a clear way of flagging them to this group of people, right? And then it is for us to basically say that that is indeed a tech debt that should be prioritized for SIG release. So if we can do that, I think that's a big win. And that's what we're trying to do. Hopefully, so yeah, feel free to add comments or make suggestions on what those criteria could be. And once we have nailed that, I feel like we could use this process further.
Right. And this will be like a pool of things that are there for the SIGs to go look at and say, okay, maybe we should prioritize one of this or two of this cycle, and pick something that is, there's always trade-off how much time it's going to take versus are we really going to fix it? If we know that we are never going to fix it, then make sure that there is enough description in there so that next time somebody says, I need this, they'll read that thing and say, okay, fine. They already decided they're not going to do this, right? So dispensation one way or another, whether we decide not to do it or, maybe we'll do it later. But then it's up to the actual SIG or a group of SIGs to, rule on that. The role of this group is just to build. The way we were feeling about this was there's a bunch of things that we are not looking at. Like code organization is not looking at this. SIG testing is not looking at this. There's nobody who's looking at this class of problems where people are asking for things and we are not giving them guidance whether we'll do it and whether we'll prioritize it. And so that's the reason for trying to come up with this. Okay,
that to me, that is not a technical debt category. That's a usability category, or new like user experience type of category. Maybe this is just a way of referring to tech debt that I've never heard before, but in my experience, tech debt is the kind of thing where you took shortcuts to do a thing and you never went back and cleaned up the shortcuts. And that the evidence of that is that something is internally more complex, or doesn't handle edge cases, or is difficult to add new things to. That's what I'm used to calling tech debt.
That's the same.
If you reduce the scope, then it is what you are saying, right? If we expand the scope, it's what I'm saying.
I'll add I think what Jordan, I think it was Jordan, right? I mostly agree. I think the main thing is when we say if we are trying to fix something that improves usability, right? That the recurring cost that it is that it is improving is basically the recurring cost of we all going through all these issues and replying to this because the usability is not good, or because we are trying to reply it on the discussion mailing list that this needs to be done this way. No, you got it totally wrong because this is not what we intended to do, right? So us having basically trying to explain that things again and again, or it's not obvious for the users, and so they come to us, or maybe they badmouth Kubernetes for whatever reason, right? I think that's the cost that we will reduce if we improve usability.
So I would, sorry, I would agree that there's costs there, but I think we already have pressure to build features. We already have pressure to improve things that users want. And to me, I'm more lined up with what Jordan's saying here, that the tech debt are things that we did that we hid. And in fact, I would think the best way to discover those, one, yeah, you can go through issues, but actually the best way is going to be to identify a list of a dozen people who know all of that tech debt in their heads because they wrote it, 4 years ago, whatever it is, 5 years ago, 3 years ago, and they'll tell you because it's probably they're burning to fix it. They just don't have time. So maybe most people maybe have already created issues, and so maybe they'll just be rediscovered things. But you'll get a good sense if you identify those people and just talk to them. They'll have a list in their head of 3 or 4 or 5, 6 things that they think should be fixed, and those have hidden costs that users don't see. But it means like Jordan, I think, said, well, now we can't add this other feature because it would require us to go back and rip out all of this stuff, or, it causes reliability issues because the edge cases aren't all covered, and et cetera, et cetera. So I think that both of those are noble efforts, but if we're going to have a tech debt effort, I would prefer it focus on things that aren't necessarily things users are pushing for, because we already have enough pressure for that, and who's sort of representing the other issues that are more hidden from users would be my question.
Yeah, the one exception to that, like long-lived bugs that are recognized as legitimate bugs that have a lot of user attention. That seems like something that maps to tech debt really well. Like this is a recognized bug that the people running the project agree is a bug. It's not a desired behavior or a designed behavior. And it's old, so it hasn't gotten attention, and it's popular, like
Sure.
Thumbs up or lots of comments or lots of me too, this bit me too. That seems like legitimate technical debt.
So how do we find them, Jordan?
Kind bug, age old, comments lots. I don't know.
I think you're doing the right thing.
Which is what we are doing.
Right, but the kind feature, I think, is where the only thing that's in contention.
The kind feature or a user reported bug, like if a user reports a bug, but it actually is an intentional designed behavior, like that could, if we're seeing those over and over, that probably means our documentation is bad, or like something about the discoverability of the decision is bad. But I'm trying to avoid this becoming like another way to get a feature request into a prioritized queue.
No, I think that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree. The way we should do this is, if it says kind feature, then we don't look at it.
Not for this. Like I think there are other contexts where that makes sense. Like when a SIG is deciding what to do, or the SIG usability, I think that falls more under their mission, I guess, of kind of look at what's painful for users, regardless of whether it was intentional or not. How can we reduce that pain with documentation or examples or features or whatever?
And maybe it is just a bad design, but that's a different priority queue really than, and different, I don't know, it already has pressure from somebody else.
Yeah, and you can, I think the namespace thing is a good example. Like we didn't change the fundamental approach, but we did do work to surface information to users to help them. So.
Right. And the other example from before was, config maps not being able to hold binary objects was one more thing that we dealt with in the past.
Yeah, I mean, that seems like a feature to me, right? That's
right. But then lots of people were asking for it. They were saying, oh, I have this certificate that I need to load up into the container, and it's you're breaking the byte stream because you're treating it as text.
Yeah, I mean, I think in that case, just improving the documentation to say why we won't do this will solve it.
We added the ability to put binary data in config maps.
Yeah, yeah, I remember doing that. So yeah.
Okay. Just making sure we all knew that.
Yeah. All I did was copy some code from secrets back into config maps. So.
Cool. I guess, yeah, I'm looking forward to comments on the doc. I'll try to make sure what we said here can be clearly distinguished, and we have a set of steps that help us at least put it in the incoming of what is not a feature request, but mostly a tech debt.
Right.
And, yeah, I think the usability part, I feel like we should address, but yeah, if this group doesn't think, other than the fact that the people have been wanting it, then yeah, we can try maybe putting those in a different bucket. But
right. So I think we have to subset and focus on things where our implementation is causing issues. I think that's the way to look at it.
Yeah, I mean, basically it's called tech debt. So
right.
Yeah, and there is the SIG usability now, which has started up, and that might be an appropriate place to bring up the other issues, and they may want to start a separate board for that kind of thing. Which, I mean, I think there's real value there. It's just whether this is the right place to do it.
Okay, so we know what to do. At least we are going to focus a little bit more crisper.
Sure.
The other thing, John, you mentioned was go talk to people, is what you said. So I think we should do that too, Mayank. We should like invite one or two people every meeting, and then kind of like take it out of their head.
Yeah, or just shoot an email to somebody. I don't think it has to be that. Like, I'm sure Jordan and Tim and David and all these folks who've been around longer than I have things in their head already that they know are problems, and they may have already put issues out there. So it may just be a repeat, but
Right, but then we have to like target people and make sure that we do it over a period of time, and then we make sure that we log the issues one way or another,
exactly.
Or find a previous one. So that is another thing that we hadn't talked about, Mayank. So we can try to do that too.
Sounds cool. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Any other topics? Otherwise, I think we're all set.
George, did you want? Sorry, Jorge, did you want to add anything?
I don't think I can add anything that hasn't been said already.
Okay. I can say we need more people, so please consider helping with this effort as well. Okay, thank you.
Okay, going once here on other topics. All right. Well, thank you, everybody, and have a great time. I guess next session would be in the middle of KubeCon, so I think that meeting will be canceled, and so it will be a month before we meet again. Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you all. Bye.
Bye.